My husband mocked me in front of his friends, saying I was just a wife. 10 minutes later, his business collapsed because he didn't know I owned his biggest client. Just a wife. My husband's laughter bounced off the mahogany walls of the private dining room. Gentlemen, my Sarah here is the perfect example of knowing your place. She's mastered the art of being just a wife. Richard raised his whiskey glass, eyes gleaming with mockery as his business associates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Hey beautiful people. Your support means everything to me. Help me reach my next big milestone by hitting that subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and ensures you never miss an amazing video. Let's dive in. I maintained my practiced smile, the one I'd perfected over 7 years of marriage, smoothing the napkin in my lap as if it were the most important task in the world. Around us, the private dining room at Le Cardinal buzzed with nervous energy. The city's business elite surrounded our table, CEOs, venture capitalists, and most crucially the entire board of Meridian Corp, Richard's biggest prospective client. If only he knew they were actually mine. Tell them, darling, Richard continued, the ice cubes in his fourth whiskey clinking against the crystal. Tell them about that time you thought about getting an MBA. He turned to James Wilson, Meridian CEO, who I'd had lunch with just yesterday. Can you imagine? I had to explain to her that the business world isn't for everyone. Some people are just meant to support from the sidelines. I caught Thomas Chen's eye across the arrangement of white orchids. As Meridian's senior partner, he'd been instrumental in our last merger. His slight frown was nearly imperceptible, but I recognized it. The same expression he wore when we negotiated particularly challenging deals. Not that my husband knew anything about those meetings. Richard, Thomas interrupted smoothly, I'm actually quite interested in Sarah's perspective on. Oh, Tom. Richard waved his hand dismissively. Sarah's perspective is best saved for choosing dinner party menus and managing our social calendar. Right, honey? His fingers dug into my shoulder with what others might mistake for affection, but I felt the possessive pressure behind it. The waiter appeared with another round of drinks, and I watched as he placed a fresh whiskey in front of my husband. Richard's hand trembled slightly as he reached for it. A tell I'd learned to recognize years ago. 7 years of marriage had taught me to read the signs of his impending social spiral. You know what makes a successful man? Richard's voice grew louder, words slightly slurred. Having a wife who knows her role. Sarah here, she's perfected it. No ambitions beyond our home, no silly career dreams competing with mine. Just a wife, and that's exactly what I need. I observed the uncomfortable glances around the table, mentally cataloging each reaction. 3 blackberries being checked under the tablecloth, 2 loosened ties, and 1 executive signaling discreetly for the check. After orchestrating hundreds of business dinners myself, I could spot a failing one from miles away. Mr. Montgomery, Patricia Reynolds, Meridian's CFO, spoke up. Perhaps we should discuss the projected quarterly. The projections can wait, Patricia. Richard's voice boomed. I'm teaching these gentlemen a valuable lesson about success. Behind every great man is a woman who knows she's just a wife. Isn't that right, Sarah? The silence that followed felt like a physical weight. I could feel every gaze in the room, some pitying, others knowing. With deliberate precision, I lifted my water glass, took a careful sip and placed it back on the table. Each movement measured, controlled, just like my response to his latest display of condescension. Actually, Richard, I began, using the same quiet authority that commanded my own boardroom, I'd love to hear more about those projections. His laugh cut through the air like a knife. See what I mean? Adorable, isn't she? Trying to participate in business talk. He turned to the table conspiratorially. Next thing you know, she'll be asking about market volatility and hedge fund strategies. My phone buzzed silently in my lap. Another update about tomorrow's board meeting, no doubt. I watched Thomas check his phone too, his expression carefully neutral. We'd spent months planning this, and Richard's behavior tonight was making it almost too easy. A toast. Richard suddenly declared, raising his glass unsteadily. To the perfect wife, one who knows her place and keeps to it. He turned to me with what he probably thought was an indulgent smile. No offense, darling, but some of us are just meant for bigger things. The business world requires a certain gravitas that you can't learn from hosting dinner parties. I raised my glass along with the others, my smile never wavering. If Richard had been more observant, he might have noticed it didn't reach my eyes. If he'd been less focused on himself, he might have caught the knowing looks exchanged between me and several Meridian executives. If he'd been sober enough, he might have realized that his biggest clients' board members were paying more attention to his wife's reactions than his words. In 12 hours, everything would change. But for now, I was content to play my part, to be just a wife for one last evening. After all, I hadn't spent years building one of the city's most successful investment firms by being impatient. Sometimes the sweetest victories are the ones you have to wait for. As I excused myself from the table, Richard's voice followed me down the hallway, still regaling his audience with stories of his business prowess. My wife wouldn't understand the complexities of what we do, he boasted. She's better suited for planning our next dinner party. In the powder room's elegant solitude, I checked my phone again. 3 urgent messages from my executive team and a brief text from Thomas Chin. Everything is in place for tomorrow. Board approval confirmed. I studied my reflection in the ornate mirror, remembering the exact moment 7 years ago when I decided to keep my professional identity separate from my marriage. But tonight was different. Tonight, the carefully constructed wall between Sarah Montgomery, devoted wife, and Sarah Chin Martinez, CEO of Martinez Investment Partners, was about to crumble. As I reapplied my lipstick, my hand steady despite the anger simmering beneath my composed exterior, I could still hear Richard's words echoing in my head. Just a wife? Returning to the dining room, I found Richard in rare form. The whiskey had loosened his tongue further, and he was now fully committed to his impromptu lecture on gender roles in business. You see, gentlemen, he gestured broadly with his glass, nearly spilling its contents. Women like my Sarah here, they don't have the killer instinct needed for big business. Right, darling? He winked at me as I took my seat. Tell them about that time you tried to understand our company's quarterly reports. I felt Thomas Chin tense beside me, but I placed a subtle hand on his arm. Not yet. The timing had to be perfect. Oh, Richard, I smiled, playing my part one last time. You know those numbers just confuse me. Exactly. Richard practically shouted, pointing at me with his glass. Leave the business to those who understand it. My wife here, she's happiest planning galas and charity events. Isn't that right, sweetheart? Patricia Reynolds, Meridian's CFO, cleared her throat. Actually, Mr. Montgomery, I'd be very interested in hearing Mrs. Montgomery's thoughts on. Patricia, Richard interrupted, his condescension thick enough to cut with a knife. Let's not put Sarah on the spot. She's just a wife, and a perfect one at that. Knows her place, doesn't try to meddle in things beyond her understanding. The room grew uncomfortably quiet. I could see James Wilson, Meridian's CEO, checking his watch for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. Several other executives were exchanging meaningful glances, and Thomas Chin was typing something on his phone beneath the table. In fact, Richard continued, oblivious to the tension in the room, I'll tell you a funny story. Last month, Sarah asked me about our company's merger strategy. Can you believe it? He laughed heartily, encouraging others to join in. A few weak chuckles followed. I told her to stick to planning our anniversary party instead. That's more her speed. I felt my phone vibrate again. Without looking, I knew it would be confirmation from my legal team. Everything was prepared for tomorrow morning's announcement. Richard's words tonight were just making the timing more poetic. You know what they say. Richard raised his glass again. Behind every successful man is a woman who knows her limitations. My Sarah here? She's accepted hers beautifully. No aspirations to be anything more than what she is, just a wife. The crystal glasses clinked half-heartedly as the table responded to his toast. I noticed Patricia Reynolds' knuckles were white around her glass stem, and James Wilson was now openly frowning. Richard dear, I spoke up, my voice carrying that quiet authority I usually reserved for board meetings. Perhaps we should discuss something else? He patted my hand condescendingly. See what I mean? Always looking out for my best interests. That's what a good wife does. Knows when to speak up and when to stay quiet. Unlike some women who think they can run companies. He laughed again, louder this time. Can you imagine? Sarah running a business? If he hadn't been so focused on his own voice, he might have noticed the slight smirks on the faces of the Meridian executives. If he hadn't been 3 sheets to the wind, he might have caught the knowing look that passed between Thomas Chin and me. But Richard had always been blind to anything that didn't fit his worldview. I mean really, he continued, warming to his theme, What does a wife know about market strategies? About client relationships? About running a multi-million-dollar operation? He turned to James Wilson. That's why I'm the perfect partner for Meridian, James. I understand the business world. I know how to handle big accounts. Unlike my lovely wife here who thinks balancing a checkbook is high finance. The insults continued to flow as freely as the whiskey, each one another nail in the coffin of Richard's business empire. By the time dessert arrived, he had thoroughly dismissed my intelligence, my capabilities, and my potential, all while trying to impress the very people who actually reported to me. As I declined the creme brulee, pleading a slight headache, I caught Thomas Chen's eye. A barely perceptible nod passed between us. In less than 12 hours, Richard would learn exactly what just a wife was capable of. But for now, I sat quietly, playing my role one last time as my husband continued to mock the very thing he should have feared most, my capabilities. The evening was winding down, and with it Richard's reign as a respected businessman. He just didn't know it yet. As the valet brought our car around, Richard was still riding high on his performance at dinner, completely oblivious to the storm brewing. I watched him hand over a generous tip, his movements loose from the whiskey, still chuckling about his clever observations regarding wives and their proper place in the world. That went perfectly, he slurred, sliding into the passenger seat. For once I was grateful for his drinking. It gave me a legitimate reason to drive and, more importantly, to stop by my office on the way home. Just need to pick up something I left at my charity office, I said casually as I turned down Madison Avenue. Richard merely grunted, his head already lolling against the window. He'd never once visited my charity office in the 7 years since I told him I was doing volunteer work. The truth was far more interesting. The gleaming 50-story building housed Martinez Investment Partners, though Richard had never made the connection between the company name and my mother's maiden name. I pulled into the private underground garage, parking in my reserved spot marked CO. Richard was already softly snoring. "I'll just be a minute, dear," I whispered, though he was far too gone to hear me. The elevator recognized my fingerprint, shooting straight up to the executive floor. At 11:30 p.m. the office was quiet but not empty. Thomas Chen was waiting in my office, along with Patricia Reynolds and James Wilson from Meridian. The wall of windows behind my desk offered a spectacular view of the city lights. But tonight, none of us were interested in the scenery. "That was quite a performance your husband put on," Patricia said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "I don't know how you've managed to keep this secret for so long, Sarah." I settled behind my desk, the familiar leather chair grounding me. Richard sees what he expects to see. And he expects to see just a wife. The words tasted bitter on my tongue. James slid a folder across my desk. "The final paperwork is ready. Once you sign these, Meridian Corp will officially terminate all contracts with Montgomery Industries and transfer exclusively to Martinez Partners. Are you sure you want to do this?" Thomas asked quietly. "It will effectively bankrupt his company." I opened the folder, uncapping my Mont Blanc pen, a gift I'd given myself after my first billion-dollar deal. Richard built his company on 3 major pillars: Meridian's contracts, Wilson Financial's investments, and the Chin Group's partnerships. I looked up at my colleagues, my friends who'd kept my secret all these years. And as of tomorrow morning, all 3 will be exclusively contracted with Martinez Partners. "He never once suspected?" Patricia asked, shaking her head in disbelief. "Even though you've been outperforming his company for the past 5 years?" I signed the final document with a flourish. Richard's ego wouldn't allow him to see it. "Do you know he actually laughed when he heard rumors that Martinez Partners was run by a woman? Said it had to be fake news because women don't have the killer instinct for big business." "Well, he's about to learn otherwise," James said, gathering the signed papers. "The press release is scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Your husband's company will lose 70% of its business value within the first hour of trading." I stood, smoothing my dress. "Have our PR team ready. Once this breaks, there will be questions about why I kept my identity hidden. We need to control the narrative." "And Richard?" Thomas asked. "What will you tell him?" A sad smile crossed my face. The truth. That while he was busy telling everyone I was just a wife, I was busy building an empire that just acquired his biggest clients. I checked my phone. A text from my driver confirming Richard was still sound asleep in the car. "It's ironic," Patricia mused, gathering her things. If he had ever bothered to attend one of your charity events, he might have noticed they were actually business networking functions. If he'd ever asked about your volunteer work. But he didn't, I finished. Because in his mind I was just a wife. And tomorrow he'll learn exactly what that wife is capable of. We rode down in the elevator together, these powerful executives who had become my closest allies. They had seen past the facade I presented at Richard's dinners, recognized the business acumen I wielded quietly but effectively. Your car is ready, Ms. Martinez, my security guard said as we reached the garage. The others walked to their own vehicles while I returned to where Richard slept, blissfully unaware that in less than 10 hours, his carefully constructed world would collapse. As I drove us home through the quiet city streets, I thought about the moment 7 years ago when I'd chosen to keep my professional life separate from my marriage. It had seemed easier then, simpler to let Richard believe what he wanted about his wife's capabilities. But tonight's dinner had confirmed what I'd known for months. The time for hiding was over. Had a great night, Richard mumbled as I helped him into bed. Showed everyone what a perfect wife you are. I watched him fall back asleep, already dreading tomorrow's hangover. Yes, dear, I whispered. Tomorrow you'll see exactly what kind of wife you have. I woke before sunrise, leaving Richard still snoring off his whiskey haze. By 7 a.m. I was back in my office at Martinez Partners, watching the early morning light paint the city skyline in shades of gold. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since I'd arrived. Everyone wanted confirmation that we were moving forward with what the media would soon dub the Martinez Maneuver. The press release is ready, my PR director Lisa announced as she entered my office. We've got exclusive interviews lined up with CNBC, Bloomberg, and the Wall Street Journal. They're particularly interested in the human angle. The CEO who hid in plain sight. I skimmed the press release on my tablet, making a few minor adjustments. Make sure they understand this isn't about revenge. It's about business. Meridian Corp, Wilson Financial, and the Chin Group are making a strategic decision to partner with the firm that's shown the best performance over the past 5 years. Even if that decision bankrupts your husband? Lisa raised an eyebrow. Especially then. I checked my watch, 7:30 a.m. Has Richard's assistant arrived at his office yet? Lisa nodded, a slight smirk playing at her lips. Jenny reports he just stumbled in looking worse for wear. She said he's already demanded 3 aspirin and keeps mumbling about last night's successful dinner. I pulled up the live feed from my trading floor on one of my office's wall screens. The energy was electric. Everyone knew what was coming. 7 years of secrecy were about to end, and with it Richard's illusions of superiority. Ms. Martinez, my assistant Michael appeared at the door. Thomas Chin is on line 1. He says Richard's been trying to reach him all morning. A small smile crossed my face as I picked up the phone. Thomas? Yes, everything's proceeding as planned. Is he getting nervous? He's left 6 messages already, Thomas replied, amusement evident in his voice. Apparently he's trying to schedule a follow-up meeting to close the deal from last night. Should I tell him I'm busy signing contracts with Martinez Partners? Let him sweat a little longer, I said, checking the time again, 8:15 a.m. The press release goes live in 45 minutes. Have your team ready to announce the transition of all Meridian accounts to Martinez Partners immediately after. I spent the next 30 minutes coordinating with our legal team, ensuring every detail was perfect. Richard's company would lose not just Meridian's business, but all associated subsidiaries and partner corporations. It would be a clean sweep. At 8:45, my phone lit up with Richard's face on the screen. I let it ring through to voicemail, imagining his hangover-induced frustration as he tried to figure out why none of his major clients were returning his calls. Ms. Martinez, Michael appeared again, everything is in place. The NYSE opening bell rings in 10 minutes. Our traders are ready to respond to the market volatility we're expecting when the news breaks. I stood straightening my blazer. Tell everyone I'll be on the trading floor for the announcement. They deserve to see this in person. The energy on the trading floor was palpable as I walked through. These people had kept my secret for years, had helped build Martinez Partners into a powerhouse while maintaining the fiction that we were just another investment firm. Today they would see their loyalty rewarded. At 8:57 my phone buzzed again, Richard. This time I answered. Darling. His voice was tense despite his attempt at casualness. Have you heard from Thomas Chin this morning? Or James Wilson. I can't seem to reach anyone from Meridian. I'm sure they're just busy, I replied smoothly, watching the seconds tick down on the trading floor's massive clock. Important executives, important meetings. But the contracts were supposed to be signed this morning. Richard's voice rose slightly. After last night's dinner, it should have been a formality. Sarah, are you sure you didn't say something to offend them? Sometimes you can be a bit. Well, you know. I checked my watch, 8:59 a.m. Actually, Richard, I think they were very impressed by last night's dinner. Particularly your observations about wives and their proper place in business. What? Sarah, what are you talking about? This is serious business, not some dinner party planning. The opening bell rang, cutting him off. On every screen on the trading floor, the press release began to appear. I watched as Richard's company's stock ticker started to flash red. Turn on CNBC, I said quietly into the phone. What? Why would I? Just do it, Richard. I could hear the TV in the background of his office coming to life, followed by the anchor's voice. Breaking news in the financial sector as Martinez Partners, led by CEO Sarah Chin Martinez, announces the exclusive acquisition of contracts with Meridian Corp, Wilson Financial and the Chin Group, all formerly held by Montgomery Industries. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. Sarah? Richard's voice was barely a whisper. What is this? I watched his company's stock price begin its free fall. This, Richard, is what happens when you underestimate someone for being just a wife. The trading floor erupted in controlled chaos around me as the market responded to the news. But I remained still, phone pressed to my ear, listening to my husband's world crumble in real time. I'll be home early today, I said finally. I think we need to talk about my career in finance. The trading floor continued to buzz with activity behind me as I made my way back to my office. My phone hadn't stopped vibrating since the announcement, a mix of congratulatory messages from industry leaders and increasingly desperate calls from Richard. Sarah. His voice cracked through the speaker when I finally answered. What the hell is happening? My stock. It's down 60%. Meridian just pulled all their contracts. Wilson Financial too. Even the Chin Group. They're all saying something about exclusive deals with Martinez Partners. This has to be a mistake. I settled into my chair, watching the numbers tumble across my screens. It's not a mistake, Richard. Though I understand your confusion. After all, what would just a wife know about hostile takeovers? What are you? His voice trailed off, and I could almost see the pieces clicking into place in his mind. Sarah Chin Martinez. Martinez, your mother's maiden name. You're the CEO everyone's been talking about. The very same. I kept my voice level, professional. The one you said couldn't possibly exist because women don't have the killer instinct for business. The sound of something shattering came through the phone. Probably the crystal whiskey tumbler he kept on his desk. How long? He demanded. How long have you been lying to me? Lying? I couldn't help but laugh. Richard, I've been running Martinez Partners for 7 years. I never lied. You just never asked. You were too busy telling everyone what I couldn't do to notice what I was actually doing. This is insane. His voice rose to a shout. You can't do this. I'm your husband. And I'm just a wife, remember? The words tasted like victory on my tongue. The kind who knows her place. Though it seems my place is at the head of a company that just acquired all your major clients. Through my office windows I could see the media vans arriving outside our building. The story was spreading faster than even our PR team had anticipated. My God, Richard's voice had dropped to a whisper. Last night, at dinner, all those things I said. About wives knowing their limitations. About women not understanding big business. I finished for him. Yes, that was quite entertaining. Especially with the Meridian board right there. Did you know Patricia Reynolds has been my mentor for the past 5 years? Another crash from his end of the line. Thomas Chin, he knew? This whole time. They all knew, Richard. Every executive at that table last night works with me regularly. Most of them report to me through various subsidiaries. I paused, letting that sink in. That's why they looked so uncomfortable when you were explaining my capabilities. Sarah, please. His voice had taken on a pleading tone I'd never heard before. We can fix this. Whatever I did wrong, however I made you feel, we can work it out. Just call off this takeover. I watched as another alert flashed across my screen. Montgomery Industries stock had dropped below the critical threshold. Emergency trading holds were being implemented. This isn't about feelings, Richard. It's business. Pure and simple. Martinez Partners made better offers, showed stronger performance, and demonstrated superior market understanding. The fact that it coincides with your public dismissal of my capabilities is just poetic timing. You've destroyed me, he whispered. Everything I built. No, Richard. You did that yourself. Every time you dismissed me, every time you mocked the idea of a woman in business, every time you declared I was just a wife, you were digging your own grave. I simply waited for you to finish digging. My assistant appeared at the door, signaling that the press was waiting in the conference room. I have to go, I told Richard. I have a press conference to attend. Unlike you, I still have a company to run. Wait. The desperation in his voice was palpable. What am I supposed to do now? I stood straightening my jacket. I suggest you start by asking your wife for business advice. Oh wait. I allowed myself a small smile. You don't believe in that, do you? As I ended the call, I could see Richard's face on every financial news channel. Photos from last night's dinner juxtaposed with shots of our company logos. The headlines were already running. Martinez Partners CEO reveals identity. Acquires husband's business in historic takeover. Ms. Martinez, my assistant, stepped in. The press is ready. And Mr. Montgomery is in the lobby demanding to see you. I gathered my tablet and straightened my shoulders. Let him up. It's time he saw exactly what Just a Wife has built while he wasn't paying attention. The elevator doors would open any minute, bringing my husband face to face with the empire I'd created in the shadows of his condescension. But first, I had a press conference to attend. After all, the business world was waiting to hear from the woman who'd hidden in plain sight, building one of the most successful investment firms in the city while being dismissed as just a wife. Let Richard wait in the lobby a little longer. He'd spent years teaching me my place. Now it was time for him to learn his. When I returned from the press conference, Richard was waiting in my office. Gone was the confident, condescending man from last night's dinner. Instead, he sat slumped in one of my visitor chairs, his usually immaculate suit wrinkled, his face ashen as he watched the financial news playing silently on my wall screens. Your secretary wouldn't let me in until you finished your press conference, he said quietly, not looking at me. Had to watch my wife, just a wife, announce the acquisition of my life's work on national television. I moved behind my desk, the leather chair feeling more like a throne as I sat down. The cityscape behind me painted a perfect backdrop for this moment. The empire I'd built while he wasn't looking. How did I not know? He finally turned to face me, his eyes red-rimmed. 7 years, Sarah. 7 years of watching you plan dinner parties and charity events. Those charity events were business meetings, Richard. Every single one of them. The people you dismissed as social climbers were CEOs, venture capitalists, and industry leaders. They came because they wanted to do business with Martinez Partners. He picked up the Crystal Award on my desk, CEO of the Year 2 years running. I remember mocking this when I saw it in your charity office. Called it a participation trophy for fundraising. That charity office was just the front entrance. You never bothered to see the other 49 floors. I gestured to the window behind me. Welcome to the real thing. The night we met, he said slowly, you told me you worked in finance. I laughed and said you must be a secretary. And I never corrected you, I finished. Because the moment you made that assumption, I saw exactly who you were. A man so convinced of his own superiority that he couldn't imagine a woman being his equal, let alone his better. Richard stood abruptly, pacing the expansive office. Is that what this is about? Revenge? Proving you're better than me? No, Richard. This is about business. Pure and simple. Martinez Partners made better offers, showed stronger returns, and demonstrated superior market understanding. The fact that it coincides with your public mockery of my capabilities is just... I paused, letting a small smile play at my lips. Fortunate timing. Fortunate. He spun to face me. You've destroyed everything I built. No, I said firmly, standing to meet his gaze. You did that. Every time you dismissed a woman's business acumen, every time you mocked the idea of female leadership, every time you declared I was just a wife, you were alienating potential partners, losing respect in the industry, and showing exactly why you didn't deserve to keep those contracts. He sank back into the chair, deflated. All those nights you stayed up planning events. Quarterly reports, I corrected. Merger strategies. Acquisition plans. The charity galas you organized. Board meetings. Investment pitches. Client negotiations. Even our anniversary dinner last month was scheduled around the Meridian Corp merger timeline, yes. I sat on the edge of my desk looking down at him. You never once questioned why all the top executives in the city attended my simple charity events. Never wondered why Thomas Chen always asked for my opinion at your business dinners. Never noticed that your biggest clients seemed more interested in talking to your wife than to you. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the muted sounds of the trading floor below. What happens now? He finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Now? I returned to my chair. Now you have a choice. You can fight this. Try to challenge the contracts, claim spousal rights, drag us both through a public legal battle that you'll ultimately lose. Or you can accept that your wife isn't just a wife. That she never was. That while you were busy telling everyone what women couldn't do, I was building something bigger than you ever imagined. Richard stood slowly, straightening his tie in a futile attempt to regain some dignity. And our marriage? I looked at the man I'd married 7 years ago, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. That depends. Can you handle being married to someone who isn't just a wife? Someone who won't sit quietly while you mock her capabilities? Someone who might actually understand business better than you do? He moved to the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. You could have told me, given me a chance to understand. I gave you chances every day for 7 years, Richard. Every time I offered an opinion you dismissed. Every time I made a suggestion you ignored. Every time you told someone I was just a wife, you were choosing not to see who I really was. He nodded slowly, finally understanding. And now everyone sees. Yes, I agreed. Now everyone sees. As the door closed behind him, I turned to look out over the city. My city, built deal by deal while playing the role he had assigned me. On the screens behind me, Richard's company's stock had been suspended from trading, while Martinez Partners' shares soared. Just a wife indeed. 3 months after the revelation that shook the financial world, I sat in the same office where I'd last seen Richard, reviewing the latest quarterly reports. Martinez Partners had not just survived the media storm, we'd thrived in it. Our stock had doubled, and the story of the CEO who built an empire while being dismissed as just a wife had become legend in business circles. Ms. Martinez? My assistant Michael appeared at the door. The divorce papers have been finalized. They just need your signature. I nodded, accepting the folder he handed me. Richard had finally stopped fighting the inevitable 2 weeks ago. After his failed attempt to claim partial ownership of Martinez Partners through marriage rights, a suggestion that made every female executive in New York collectively roll their eyes, he'd retreated to his Hamptons house to lick his wounds. Also, Michael continued, Time magazine is here for the Person of the Year photo shoot. The irony isn't lost on me, I mused, signing the divorce papers with the same pen I'd used to sign the Meridian Corp contracts. From just a wife to Person of the Year in 3 months. The photographer set up while I reviewed the morning's trades. The headline on Bloomberg caught my eye. Montgomery Industries files for Chapter 11, former CEO steps down. Below it was a photo of Richard leaving his lawyer's office, looking aged beyond his years. Ms. Martinez, the Time photographer called, how would you like to be portrayed? I turned to the wall of windows, the city sprawling before me. Just capture me doing what I've always done, running my company. The interview that followed was thoughtful, focusing not just on the dramatic revelation but on the years of work that led to it. The journalist was particularly interested in the dinner parties. Every major deal we closed started at one of those events, I explained. While Richard thought I was planning menus, I was planning mergers. The business world's biggest players came to my charity functions because that's where the real deals happened. And your husband never suspected? I smiled, remembering Richard's dismissive waves whenever I tried to discuss business. He saw what he expected to see. It's amazing what people will overlook when they've already decided what you're capable of. After the interview, Patricia Reynolds stopped by. She'd become a more frequent visitor since the revelation, no longer having to pretend our meetings were about charity events. The business schools want you to speak, she said, settling into the chair Richard had occupied during our last conversation. Harvard, Wharton, Stanford. They all want to hear about the woman who revolutionized how we think about power in business. They want to hear about revenge, I corrected, about a wife taking down her husband. No, Patricia shook her head. They want to hear about a brilliant CEO who built something extraordinary while navigating suffocating expectations. The fact that you maintained your cover for 7 years while outperforming every major firm in the city? That's what they want to understand. I glanced at the divorce papers on my desk. Richard finally signed away his claims this morning. How's he doing? As well as can be expected for a man who lost everything because he couldn't see past his own prejudices. I turned to the window, watching the sunset paint the city gold. The funny thing is, if he'd ever truly partnered with me, we could have built something incredible together. But then you wouldn't be the legend you are now, Patricia smiled. The CEO who hid in plain sight, who turned just a wife into the most powerful phrase in business. My phone buzzed. Another interview request, this time from Forbes. They wanted to do a cover story, The Art of Invisible Power, how Sarah Chin Martinez changed the game. The business world has changed, Patricia observed. No one's going to dismiss a wife's opinions quite so quickly anymore. Good, I said firmly. That was always the point. Not the takedown, not the revenge, but changing how people see power. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should watch most carefully. As Patricia left, I opened my laptop to review the latest acquisition proposals. They'd been flooding in since the revelation. Everyone wanted to do business with the woman who'd built an empire in the shadows of someone else's condescension. My phone buzzed again. A text from Richard, signing papers now. For what it's worth, I'm sorry I never saw you. I thought about responding, but what was there to say? He'd had 7 years to see me, to recognize that his wife was more than just a wife. His failure to do so had cost him everything, and had shown the business world that power doesn't always look like we expect it to. Instead, I turned back to my work. There were deals to close, companies to acquire, and a new generation of business leaders to inspire. The days of being just a wife were over. Now I could finally be exactly who I'd always been. A CEO who had proven that the greatest power often lies in being underestimated. On my desk, next to the signed divorce papers, sat the latest issue of Business Weekly with the headline that had become my legacy. The Wife Who Wasn't. How Underestimation Became the Ultimate Business Strategy. I smiled, remembering Richard's words from that fateful dinner. Just a wife? Sometimes the smallest underestimation leads to the biggest fall.